Welcome back. We are now at Module 6, Criterion 5, Academic Staff. Academic staff are a very important component in any degree program. Without the teaching and supervision, no program can succeed. But it is not only for this reason that we need to pay attention to the academic staff. Often, academic staff planning in a university has a 30-year or more horizon. Wouldn't you agree? Once an academic staff is hired, he or she usually stays with the university for many years. Academic mobility in ASEAN country universities is rare. This is unlike in Western country universities where there are career pathways to move between academia and industry. This is not the case in many ASEAN country universities. We will look at the academic staff manpower planning process, look at their training needs, look at computing their teaching and research workload. Very important also is to consider a university's promotion and tenure process, and generally look at how the system is geared towards managing and rewarding their output. First, as mentioned, an academic staff's planning horizon can be as long as 30 years. The process begins with manpower planning and identifying competency requirements for a department. With this, the department or university sets out its recruitment plan. What advertisement to put up to attract faculty members? It takes time to hire faculty members. It is usually an at least 2-year process. In many cases, the hiring process takes an even longer route. Many universities hire from within. That is, bright undergraduate students who do well are encouraged to pursue a master's degree, at which time they may be hired as tutors. They are paid a stipend while studying for their master's degree, which would take about a year or two to complete. In the meantime, they start looking for a suitable overseas PhD degree program to study, one with a scholarship available. Assuming the PhD degree applicant is successful, it actually commences. It takes about 4 years to earn a PhD degree, at which time the newly minted academic staff returns to the alma mater to begin a career of teaching and research. So, the hiring process alone using this route can take as much as 6 years. And as we all know, the process is not always a success. At times, candidates jump ship or are enticed by better prospects elsewhere. But assuming that the academic staff career begins, they cannot be expected to be productive from their first year. They need time to settle into their new job, time to get their research started, and it may be several years before they are able to produce good journal publications and start making a name for themselves in their research area. Note also that just because a person has a PhD, it does not mean that the person can teach. All academic staff need to undergo teaching pedagogy training. And as we all know, it takes years to hone one's skills to be a great teacher. At the next stage, a productive academic staff with the right resources can be expected to generate returns for the university for at least 20 years. Productive in terms of teaching well, supervising higher degree students, producing good publications, and carving out a niche. Academic staff are also expected to secure research grants on their own. Before long, it has been 30 years and the academic staff can look forward to retirement. But before this happens, another cycle of searching for new blood would need to begin. The cradle-to-grave process for an academic staff is a highly rigorous one, requiring very long-term vision and planning if it is to succeed. As such, the assessment will highly scrutinize this process. Central to an academic staff duties are the teaching and research activities. This slide shows the calculation for teaching or FTE, full-time equivalent. Assuming that a full-time teaching staff works 40 hours a week, 40 hours would equal 1.0 FTE. If the staff has a teaching workload of 8 hours a week, then the FTE would be 8 divided by 40 or 0.2. FTEs can also be calculated for students. For example, assuming that a full learning load for students is 20 hours per week. This sounds reasonable in terms of the number of lectures and lab classes that students have to attend each week on average. This 20 hours would be 1.0 FTE. If a student attends 10 hours of lectures a week, then 0.5 FTE would have been used up, leaving another 10 hours to be spent on other contact studying related activities. Let's look at two other examples. If the official teaching load per academic staff is 4 courses per semester, then to teach one course would incur a load of 0.25 FTE. If an academic staff were to be assigned just 2 courses to teach, this would incur 0.5 FTE, leaving another 0.5 FTE for other teaching-related activities. The FTE equivalent for a student's studying load can also be calculated likewise as the slide shows. So, for Criterion 5 academic staff, data needs to be provided concerning the teaching load of the various categories of staff: lecturers, associate professors, full professors, and so on. The data can be cut in many ways. It can be shown also for part-time staff who may have an assigned workload of 10 to 20 hours a week. It can be shown for those who primarily teach but do no research work. It can be shown for those who teach a little but engage primarily in research work. Providing such data is primarily to show that the academic staff workload is well monitored, that they are not too heavy or too light, and that there is a balance of load across all academic staff. Such workload information is used in many ways, including in annual performance review for salary adjustment purposes, to make sure that the junior teaching staff are not overly loaded, or even for the purpose of deloading certain academic staff who take on administrative duties, as will be touched on later. Information on the total FTE of academic staff, total FTE of students, and also on staff-to-student ratio can be provided also. It is pointed out that such information are not asked to be provided such that certain FTE values or staff-to-student ratio would be deemed minimally acceptable. It is not. This is the example stated earlier of what it means to not be rule-based, to not have to specify minimum numerical requirement. The assessment of the academic staff moves next to looking at their competencies. Content discipline is a key competence. How knowledgeable are they in what they teach? As mentioned, this is different from being a good teacher. So, teaching pedagogy skills are an important competence of academic staff. Research is a staple task for many academic staff. The measure here would be their publication record. Oftentimes, academic staff take on some amount of administrative workload and in leadership role. How well does the academic staff perform in her stint as a department head? IT skills and literacy would be a required competence for all staff in a university. Training needs are an important feature in keeping the academic staff motivated in their job. Every year, a budget would be set aside for training needs. These may be funds to attend conference, to attend pedagogy training, skills upgrade, specialized courses, or specialized qualifications. The AUN-QA assessment looks at how the training needs are determined annually. The budget set aside, the courses made available, the delivery of the courses, and more importantly, what happens after the training? How is the outcome evaluated? The training needs expenditure have to be justified. As mentioned, the entire promotion and tenure process at a university is probably one of the most rigorous that any academic staff has to go through. As such, the process has to be transparent, highly informative, the requirements need to be stated explicitly, and the timeline informed, and the layers of approval required are multiple. Someone once said that the decision to hire an academic staff is really a $2 to $5 million decision, and one that will last 30 years. This is because $2 to $5 million is about the total salary that an academic staff will earn throughout a career spanning about 30 years. And because it is still often the case that academic staff are not fired or only very seldom fired, that it is still an iron rice bowl at many universities. The decision is one that sticks for one generation. Still on the topic of academic staff, they teach, do research, do admin work, provide community service, and so on. Sometimes, or oftentimes, the workload of an academic staff is higher than what is spelled out on paper. The job of the dean or the department head is to see that the workload trusted onto the academic staff are acceptable and balanced across all staff. And if this is not the case, to make recommendations on how to rebalance the workload. One last slide before we look at the individual requirements of this criterion. The reward and recognition system in place can be a great motivator for the academic staff to excel and to find fulfillment in their work. What are the rewards for publishing high-quality papers? Many universities provide monetary incentive for research excellence. There are also Best Teacher, Best Use of Information Technology in Teaching awards, and at times, it turns out that certain academicians are actually good administrators. How are they deloaded from teaching and research when they take on administrative leadership roles? Let's now look at the individual requirements for Criterion 5 academic staff. For Requirement 5.1, the entire academic staff planning life cycle is looked at closely. Are the hiring processes sound? Should other avenues of searching for new staff be considered? Is there proper planning to ensure sufficient manpower in the years to come? If the program has in its plan the creation of one or more areas of excellence, is manpower planning also considered? What is the stage of academic manpower distribution for the department? Are there many junior staff? Are there many senior staff who will retire in the next several years? Is the manpower sufficient to cater to the needs of the program in the years ahead? Requirement 5.2 asks to see the data on academic staff workload. Workload for teaching, for research, and for service. This is done for several reasons. First is to ascertain that the overall workload across all staff is sufficient and is sustainable for the years ahead. Second, are there any areas in the department where workload is high or there is understaffing? Third, How many lecturers in training are currently pursuing their PhDs? The question is basically, are the current and future academic needs of the department well planned? Requirement 5.3 looks at the needed competencies of the program. Do the academic staff have good content knowledge and pedagogy? Are the expertise in the various sub-areas sufficient? For those asked to take on administrative roles, is there a commensurate reduction in their teaching load? Basically, are all the academic manpower needs of the program catered for the present and for the future? As mentioned, the promotion and tenure process of any university is a rigorous one. This is looked at closely for requirement 5.5. Is such a system in place? Is the system adequate? Is it transparent? Are its processes overly lengthy? Are the processes fair to all seeking promotion and tenure? In other words, is the system meritocratic? Every organization has to have in place clear rules, guidelines, statutes, and regulations that spell out what its employers can or cannot do, what the standards are to which they are expected to hold themselves to. This is requirement 5.6 for a university. Such policy manuals have to be all-encompassing, covering methods of leave, personal conduct, rights and privileges, communication within and outside of the university, acts of crime, employee relationship, academic freedom, ethics, accountability, and many other issues. Click the link on this slide. It shows the University of Pittsburgh Staff Handbook. The information provided therein are wide-ranging and may be considered as a best practice in staff handbook design. Requirement 5.7 seeks to understand the training system put in place for the development of the academic staff. As mentioned previously, what are the training activities available? Have the training needs been systematically identified? What training budget is set aside yearly? Are indicators in place to determine whether training is effective and the money well spent? Are there any blind spots that the training do not cater for? For the last requirement of Criterion 5, the program and university has to show its performance management and reward system put in place to recognize and encourage excellence. Excellence mainly in teaching and research, but at times there is also excellence in service and in administration. What are the incentivization schemes for doing good research? What best teacher awards are there in place to encourage excellence in teaching? Or perhaps innovation in teaching? We have come to the end of Module 6, Criterion 5, Academic Staff. We move next to Module 7, Criterion 6, Student Support Services.